Hello, welcome to Human Tech, a podcast about the intersection between humans and technology. My name is Guthrie, and I'm here with Susan. Hi, Susan.
Hey, Guthrie.
And we have a very special guest today. You want to introduce our guest?
We do. We have Sydney Anh Mai. And Sydney is a product designer at Kickstarter. And she's joining us today. Hi, Sydney.
Hi, how are you? Thanks for having me.
Yeah, we're glad to have you here. And you are talking to us today from what location?
Brooklyn, New York.
Brooklyn, New York.
Very nice.
All right. So, Sydney, we haven't met in person yet. One day we will, I hope.
I really hope so.
But we have talked on the phone together a couple times. So I guess let's start. I mean, there's all kinds of things I want to talk to you about. But why don't we just start with having you talk a little bit about what it's like to be a product designer at Kickstarter, and then maybe you can also talk to us a little bit about what you have been doing, how long you've been at Kickstarter, and what you did before you got there. Let's start there.
Yeah, for sure. So let's start with Kickstarter. I started at Kickstarter in March this year, so it's been 9 months, and I actually started in quarantine. I started working from home, and I have not met a lot of my coworkers in person, so it's been a very interesting experience. But we did ship a big feature this year, and that was all done remotely, so I'm very proud of the team. At Kickstarter, I am a product designer on the creator tools team, and what that means is I build tools for creators on our platform. And most recently, we ship add-ons, which is a feature that allows creators to set up and manage optional add-on rewards, and backers to bag for them, to add them to their main pledge during checkout. And it was a very high demand functionality by our community. So I'm very happy to see it launch and out in the world.
So one of the reasons that we wanted to have her on is I think your experience really is unique. We usually talk to people who are, I don't know, stuffy. I've done a bunch of stuff already.
Stuffy.
Yeah, stuffy.
Yeah,
sometimes.
So you mean
Stuffy.
Hopefully none of our previous guests are listening to this.
Brilliant.
Out that you think they're stuffy.
But brilliant.
Uh-huh.
I do, for the listeners out there, we once got a review that I believe called Susan like a pretty corporate, and she's been very bitter about that ever
thought
since.
That was a compliment.
Okay, so would you consider being corporate a compliment in where amongst your peers in Brooklyn?
Amongst my peer in Brooklyn.
If one of the people who was like, your age, hanging out in the UX field, rolled over and was like, "Hey, you're pretty corporate."
I think the popular consensus would be no, it's not cool, especially in Brooklyn. But I design for businesses. I've worked with clients from big to small. I've worked at startups. I've worked for clients like IBM. I work at Kickstarter. It's all a variety of sizes, and I think I've learned a great deal every time I work with a different size client.
Yeah. So Susan, can we just explore this for 2 minutes?
Go right ahead.
Okay, so here we have when you were growing up, everyone always works for big companies. It's just there's lots of people are working for companies. That's great, and they're basically spending their lives trying to help make this company more money. And in theory, you might ancillarily be able to, make the world a better place, maybe. But that's really a cherry on top. Most people never really get to, and that is totally, totally, totally okay. If you're if you're at the UX team and somewhere, and your goal is just to sell more, generic product
Right.
here, I think that's fantastic. Now, Susan, when you
Mhm.
were growing up and someone called you corporate, why was that a good thing?
Well, I don't know that anyone, let's see, I don't know that it was a good thing. Um, I
Even
think it
even
had,
back in the day,
I think it might have had a slightly different meaning than it does now,
which
but
was.
maybe not. Maybe not.
So I can tell you my interpretation of it.
Well, all right, back in the day, as you say,
Uh-huh.
it would have meant that you were, part of what we would have called the establishment. It would have meant that you were uh, not radical, not cool. You were part of the status quo, which is probably what it means now. Um, it might have even had a more negative meaning back then than it does now. There were the square people, and then there were the hip people. And if you were corporate, you were one of the square people.
However, so one thing I should say is, and the reason I'm getting to this is that I really do think that there has been a change in the corporate culture. People who are working at corporations, how the mental model of how they view themselves has shifted. So when you probably were starting out your career, Susan, um, standing out, being unique, diversity, things that was probably frowned upon. I'm imagining that your first couple days on the job when you were starting your sort of first big career, um, job, uh, tattoos, interesting hairstyles. These things were, uh, uh, radical clothing. These things are probably not accepted or seen as a
Yeah, they
positive.
definitely were. I mean, they're always a signal. I would say they were a stronger signal back back then, and um, and not you wouldn't have gotten the job. I
Yeah,
mean, you just wouldn't have ever. You wouldn't show up the first day on the job like that because you wouldn't have gotten the job.
yeah, yeah. So I mean, being corporate was something that was sort of a almost a it was an unwritten mandated policy from the top down. And the maybe the nicer way to say that is professionalism, perhaps.
Yeah, I don't know.
Whereas, hey, tell us, you want to tell us a little bit about the very, very straight laced culture at Kickstarter and how they definitely do not let any individual expression occur at their employees?
um,
I'm assuming
I
that's not the case. I've never
that
actually been
is
to
not the
Kickstarter.
case. I know you're making a joke. No, yeah, Kickstarter is an interesting case. They've been around for 10 years, no, 11 years now, and very much like they still have a very startup-y kind of vibe. And even when I was in the office interviewing, I could feel the energies from, and the individuality from people working there. And yeah, even throughout my interview process, it was rigorous, but it was really fun. And I think people were having a conversation with me as opposed to like, testing me. And overall, like, yeah, that was just the energy that I got from them. Yeah.
So I think it's probably a good thing that the individuality is recognized by companies as, oh, you're actually providing new perspectives, and
Yeah,
actually new perspectives might actually even mean creativity and more money,
for sure. Yeah.
better outcomes. Um, so just that little anecdote there, we can see how far uh, uh, the I guess things have changed. But also, one of the reasons that we wanted to talk about this topic was because you know there is a lot of next generation UXers coming through, and I think they are pretty different from maybe the Gen X
Mm,
and old,
or
or even
next generation
mhm.
old millennials,
or next generation product
product
designers.
designers
Should
as well.
say too.
Yes, and I think I find it interesting because so Susan, we talk about this all the time. You don't want to put your biases into the products you're designing. In theory, if you're really putting the user first, whether you're 80 years old or 25 years old, we're in any part of the country, if you are putting your users first, the end product should probably end up the same, because if you did a perfect job, you're doing whatever is best for the user, and your own biases about what the product should be shouldn't really shine through.
Although
Um,
that's not true.
but that's just
Yeah.
it, right? If you
Yeah.
That's not how it works at all, and those biases always shine through. And so this sort of next generation of product designers, uh, you know, you guys are really going to influence and really change how products look and feel and are designed,
Mhm.
for better or for worse. And so just getting picking your brain about what you think is important in
Mhm.
design, and
Yeah. So Sydney, how do you
I think it's cool.
personally uh, try to, assuming you do try to, not let your own biases about the world or about what you prefer and so on. How do you guard against that creeping into
Mm.
your product design decisions?
Yeah. I think um, I think I think the UX world in general likes to talk about validating hypotheses, and that's definitely something that's been brought up a lot, and that's a phrase that UXers use to flex. And I think as much as the UX world like talking about it, they don't do it quite enough. And when they do it, it kind of their go-to methods are usually relatively qualitative. They interview users. It's a lot easier to start interviewing someone and just start talking to them than do some quantitative data analysis. And for me, like the one thing that has kept me relatively like unbiased over the years, over the course of my career, has been my ability to go into Looker and to query some data about our users and just have a very like top of the line, big picture of who the people I design for are, and just some preliminary filtering and yeah, just to see like what and drawing patterns from like these groups that I see, so that I don't go into an interview and you know just pick out 10 random people. Like I want the pool to be representative of the 80% case user and the 20% case user. I want the pool to be all inclusive, and yeah, I think that's how I've been going about it.
Is there a kind of standard profile of if you're thinking about because you had said you guys shipped a product um, or some product features at Kickstarter. Is there a standard user profile for the types of product features that you've been working on? Like who is a Kickstarter creator?
Mm. So we do have personas. We have, the leisure creators who who would do like 1 or 2 products on Kickstarter, and they're relatively small. And then there are, the big time creators who run, $1 million campaigns. And a lot of time we're able to bucket creators based on the size of their campaign, their experience running campaigns, the category of projects that they are they are making, and and their risk profile. Are they likely to fulfill? And those are the filters that they translate into physical filters that I go into our Looker database and I filter them. And yeah, for I think for every single like user research like project that we want to run, I want the pool of our sample pool to be representative of all of those creators of different sizes. Yeah.
All right. So can you give an example of how you might have a group of users who, have a score or, on this factor, they're this, versus a group of users who, are at a different end of the continuum on that same factor, and then how you might design a product differently for them based on where they're falling on that scale?
Yeah, I think that is a really good question. I think so. I think a good example for this is when Kickstarter first started out, they were a lot more like non-physical reward projects than like physical rewards projects. And then over the years, it has transformed into this platform where we call it the narrowing of the platform, where there's a lot more creators that create like physical reward projects, like they produce like a self-watering plant pot, as opposed to like use Kickstarter to fund their album or CD. And that I think every single time when we design the reward creation flow, is most recently add-ons, we have to keep that in mind, that like, yes, although the 80% case is creators who are making physical rewards, and they probably want to itemize their big rewards into like the different components of that physical reward and like what is being shipped out. There are our 20% case, the creators who really don't need to itemize at all, and they just maybe they have like a PDF comic book and that's it. And the UI needs to be able to like accommodate both. It needs to be flexible enough to include all of the itemization, and it needs to be flexible enough as well to like just have one single big reward. So I think that's the closest example that I could think of. Yeah.
Yeah. So you said that when you, it sounds like when you interviewed at Kickstarter, that the interview process was at least partly in person.
It was partly, it was in person.
But then when you actually started working there, at that point, then
right,
everyone was working from home. So how do you think, starting at a new position and basically, working remotely as a new employee and still working remotely, right? And getting to know all your team and so on, totally remotely. How do you think that's changed? How is that different than if you had been able to, go into an office? Do you have any sense of that?
Yeah, definitely. I think throughout my career has always I have always been like a very like in person kind of person. I like to you know um you know tap the engineer on the shoulder and check in on how they're coding and how the product is coming along. And I like to be able to see the work in progress, like literally, right in the desk right next to me. And I haven't been able to, do that since we all start from home. So I think, yeah, it just, in the beginning it was hard. And I think I kind of lost some of the, my original, inclination to be a lot more in person and interactive. I kind of forgot that I like to do that, and I think like it took a couple of months in for me to realize that, oh, like there must be other ways to do it. And we start setting up like desk checks with engineers to check in on progress. Yeah, it's been really fun. There's some very collaborative session where I kind of see them code live, and we kind of tweak things, live, and it was really great.
So would you say there's one technology tool that has been the most useful in helping with this issue that you've been using?
Hmm. Yeah, so I think for brainstorming, and to gather the whole team's thoughts together, I think Mirror has been a really good platform. Miro, Mirror. They're like an online collaboration tool. It's basically an artboard, and pin different sticky notes and stuff on it. It's very free form and free format, and yeah, really, it's very easy to use, and we use it a lot, and we love it at Kickstarter.
Yeah, I wonder at the end of all this, well, if there ever is an end to all of this remote work, what is going to happen? I can just it's like an archaeological dig,
Yeah.
where centuries from now, someone will look and say, what was this time period where there's all these abandoned Miro boards? I wonder what happened during 2020. No, but you kind of wonder what's going to happen moving forward. Like if and when we start working together in person, will we still do everything on a Miro board? Guthrie, what's your impression of that?
I think Miro is probably here to stay. I think there's a lot of, I mean, yeah, it's sort of like there have been. I'm a little bit of a history buff, and there's sort of this. I don't know. I guess you can call it theory, I suppose. That basically there are certain periods in history when cultures, when the sort of the status quo was uprooted, and you can maybe think of like some sort of invading army is running a region for a while, and by history, right, a while is like 200 years. So there are these times when there's this sort of cultural melting that happens, where the old systems are sort of removed, and through just necessity, new systems are created, and a lot of I don't know. They're just it's like would this society be as successful or be the way it is if it hadn't been for the time that so and so conquered the territory 1,000 years ago, and all of a sudden everyone started speaking the same language, or they all adopted the same form of weighing things or monetary stuff, or the ideas of such and such financial stuff kind of spread. And so during these periods of change, of sort of hyper change, and the destruction of old patterns, that's sort of that's the new status quo moving forward. And once the invaders, are eventually, they leave, they don't ever really truly leave. It's like It's like a part of them is sort of imprinted there, and that's just sort of part of the society now. And so I would expect that there are a lot of habits and a lot of new processes. So yeah, something like Miro that just that stick and they doesn't go away. And it's just a part of us now, part of our workflows, and that's good. That's fine. That's exciting.
Sydney, you agree with that?
Yes, I think they definitely are. I think yeah, they are they're the artifacts of this past year, and they're going to continue producing artifacts for the years to come. I think even when things are back to normal, I don't think work culture will be completely the same as it was before. Like I definitely expect a lot more of working from home being the norm, and being able to collaborate from home like this is it's definitely very useful. Yeah, so I think it's a good tool to stay.
All right,
All
so
right,
yeah,
go ahead.
are we both gonna change the topics at the same time? Was that we were gonna do?
I don't know. Go ahead. You can go ahead and go first, and I'll go later.
Okay, so Sydney, one of the interesting things that we would just like to know a little bit about, and you have a unique perspective on this, and it's something we've chit chatted a little bit about before, not on this podcast,
Mm.
but in other places. You have a bit of experience of the cultural differences in design between, I guess you would call sort of Europe slash American design, and what I guess we'd call Eastern, more Asian design, especially when it comes to mobile apps. I don't
Right.
know how familiar the audience is with any of those concepts. You want to just do a little, just give a little background, and then we'll dive into it.
Yeah, I think because of my upbringing and
Which I don't know if anyone knows about, so don't forget
right.
to.
For sure. So I was born and raised in Vietnam, in Hanoi, Vietnam, until I was 15 years old, and then I came to the States to for boarding school, and then I went to college here, went to school at NYU, and then I've been working here ever since. So it's been 10 years, and really, I think I really grew up in two places. I split my time, so definitely, I think there's a word that there's an anthropological work for people like us. They're called third culture kids. And I think in terms of design, like I really look for influence from a variety of applications from other cultures. And I like to incorporate elements of Eastern and Western designs. And I think that because of my upbringing and my background and what the thing that I gravitate towards. I like to challenge, conventional notions of aesthetics. Yeah, so one of the most prominent things about Eastern design, especially Eastern like web design, is the high information density. I think yeah, when you look at a Chinese or like a Japanese website, there's a lot. You kind of get bombarded with information on the first glance, like on the first page, and then yeah, I think there's definitely this underlying cultural notion that space is limited, physical and both virtual, like online space, and so there's that higher information density that provides a sense of familiarity to Eastern users. And yeah, and I think another aspect that's worth touching on is in a lot of Eastern websites and applications, there's a lavish use of flash banners and iconography and colors and graphic, and it's just very robust. And it might make the site look dated. But yeah, it's definitely another big difference. Yeah.
Susan, you want to do follow-ups or should I?
You go first, and then I'll follow up on your follow-ups.
So information density, just for people who may not be familiar with apps or websites from China or Japan, literally when you look at the screen, there's just less white space. So is that an accurate understanding?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, there's definitely a lot less negative space, and you see all the information at once. You don't really need to scroll. You just see it's like a big menu, basically.
And so, do you have any theories about why in the United States, at least, people seem to like having the wide open spaces, lots of white space? Maybe that means more clicks, more scrolling, more whatever. But like whatever, we like we like that sort of broad, not cluttered look versus in Asian markets where they certainly they need to be using all that space.
Yeah, I think underlyingly it ties to our cultural differences. It's in Asia, there's the space overall, like I previously mentioned, physical space is limited, and that translates into the web. I think in the West there's certain like frivolity when it comes to space, and the freedom to like use the space in like a web page. And I think and also I think with a lot of Asian application, they like devices, they're built to cater to an older, more aging population, and the applications are need to be able to like live in older devices. And I think when you have to like scroll a lot in like an old PC, it's not a great experience. And I think there's definitely like a technological advantage here in the West, where the devices are a bit newer, and also the population is a lot more used to like fancier devices and like newer browsers. So I think that's also ties into that.
So do you think that like in like 10 years from now, all the Asian application design is going to have like tons of white space because they'll have like all the modern hardware that can run all the applications? Or do you think there's something else going on?
I don't know if that's necessarily true, because in 10 years I think over there, like in the East, like we would still have a very aging population. That kind of age structure is not going to change really quick. And overall, like for an aging population, it's a lot more trustworthy. It's to like be able to look at a page and like see everything. And yeah, it's just a lot more utilitarian, I guess, to be able to do that in one single big glance.
And if it has to do with the physical space, that's not likely to change dramatically in 10 years later.
I think if anything, what I've observed is with Facebook has really like become like an all-in-one application that it is hard to put a name to Facebook now. It's like there's so much functionality in it. There's posting, but there's also marketplace and selling, and it's very much has taken up this model that a lot of Asian application has, which is WeChat. You can chat on it, you can shop on it, you can book a restaurant on it, and it has been very interesting to see like the birth of these all-in-one kind of consolidated applications. Yeah.
Unless the antitrust
Yeah.
movement gets going, and then we might not have those.
Right.
I was reminded when you were talking, though, about a conversation I had years ago with someone from Asia who had come over to the States to do some work and to stay for, a couple months. And she was talking about the emotional reaction she had. She flew into, I think, JFK in New York, but then she was going to be staying with some people that she knew out in Connecticut, right? Which is outside of New York. And this was actually a pretty rural part of Connecticut. And she had never, she'd grown up in Asia. She'd never really been outside of Asia, except for maybe some trips to major cities. So this was her first experience living and staying for, a couple months out in what we would consider rural America. And she talked about her.
Can I interrupt you with an East Coast question? Is there such thing? Yeah. Susan's lived on the East Coast for
Yeah.
Does rural Connecticut exist?
Yes.
Okay. Because I'm from the Midwest. When we think Connecticut, we think of not urban, but we think of little small New England towns.
There are very many small New England towns and lots of suburban, and there's also rural Connecticut.
Okay, I believe you.
So where you're out on a piece of property that's pretty large, and I mean, in the distance you can see another house, but they're not next door to you. Okay. Not too different from where you grew up in Wisconsin, Guthrie. So anyway, she said when she was riding in this car, someone had picked her up and she was riding in the car, and she was having a negative emotional reaction. Like she found it scary. Like it was frightening to have all that essentially white space, It made her feel vulnerable. It made her feel, what if something goes wrong? There's no one near me to help me out. It was just this, rather than having this idyllic reaction of, oh, isn't this beautiful? Won't this be nice to be in this quiet place? To her, it was a frightening place.
Right.
And that, it made me think about, we have these sometimes largely unconscious emotional reactions to physical density.
Right.
Depending on what we're used to. And, you're tying in physical density to digital density. And so I can, there's probably a lot more, me being the psychologist, probably a lot more psychological issues that we don't even think about with this question of screen density and East versus West or cultural differences.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely right. And I really like that anecdote that you just gave. I definitely think that to a lot of people, be able to identify negative space is comfortable and and breathable, but to people from the other side of the world, people in the East, it creates their inability to see everything at once, and it creates this mistrust in the site, in the application. It creates this they don't have enough things to show. So that's really interesting.
Yeah, and there's some research that was done in terms of users in Japan. I don't know if they did research in any other places, but there's the concept, the term that we talk about is progressive disclosure, where you show a little bit of information and then you click on a link and more information will show up. And in Japan, when they did this particular piece of research, and I should look for this reference while I'll finish my conversation and then I'm going to go look up the reference while you guys talk, so that I don't just say they. Anyway, they found that in with the U.S. audience that they tested, people liked the idea of using progressive disclosure because it meant there wasn't too much information at once and it wasn't overwhelming and they could click when they wanted more. But in Japan, the reaction to that was what you just said, which is, I don't trust the site. Why are they hiding the information?
Right.
So it wasn't seen as a positive thing at all.
Yeah, that's super interesting. Yeah.
Whereas, you know,
All
I
right.
think a lot of people.
I'm gonna go look up this reference. You guys keep talking.
Okay, we'll talk amongst ourselves. Yeah, progressive disclosure is something that, in a lot of ways, like if you, I do, I'm a behavioral economist. I mean, I write about it and speak about it, and I actually just I'm doing a sort of a video course all about behavioral economics, and the subject that I just finished video editing was all about trust. And how, I mean, people really, really, really underrate how important trust is in a product and in society,
Right.
and
Right. For sure.
and for economies as well. And so there are these inefficiencies that occur when there's a lack of trust. It means when there is trust, you can do things in a more efficient manner. And progressive disclosure for the user, for their, I don't know, cognitive visual load, I suppose, it is more efficient if you have less stuff on a page. There's just less that the user needs to concentrate on, focus on. So much like, think if you walked into a store and most of the shelves were empty. If you have trust that, they have that stuff in the back, they're plenty stocked, they have all the things I need, it's just not directly in front of me, and then I can just, ask, that's fine, then it's a little more efficient because you can sort of focus on, one or two products at a time. You don't have to have like the grocery store, right? But in the grocery store model, even here in the United States, like what makes people feel comfortable is like the shelves totally stocked with food.
Right.
There's no shortage of food. There's just food everywhere.
Right.
So if you don't trust that a site is displaying all the information, either because they're trying to hide something, or they just don't offer the same products and services, or they don't have all the information. A lot of times you use progressive disclosure if you're like, I don't know, there's some big fancy business application, and there's like a ton of data. But if you don't show it, if you don't trust that they have it, you may think, oh, this product is, inferior. And so I think this is all to say that I just did a whole section about how people underestimate the importance of trust on everything, and I think trust in design also is a big factor, because I mean, yeah, I guess if you say, hey, look at all the stuff we have, and we're just trying to cram all the stuff on the screen, I guess it probably feels like, hey, these guys do a lot. And but it's almost like a lot of companies, I feel in America, like specialization's a good thing. It's like, we only make like rubber gaskets for toilets. That's all we do. We're just, and so our website, you can order one thing, and it's the rubber toilet gasket. And so as an American, I'm like, yes, I needed a rubber toilet gasket for my toilet. These guys this is the place. Like, this is what they do. Now Amazon's the counter, but they do a really good job developing that trust with their consumers. So assuming you're going to some place for the first time and you may not have that trust, to me, as a born and bred American, the idea that there's one company and they only do one thing, and they don't have like any products, and they if their website was just blank with a thing that says like, buy a rubber toilet gasket, I'd be like, this is the best website. I'm so happy that I'm here. But it just sounds like maybe that's not the impression that happens in other places.
Yeah, that's interesting. And your toilet example kind of reminds me of um, Hello Tushy, which is this really great bidet product, and it's yeah, and their website like basically that just like you can buy this attachment to your toilet, like, and yeah, it's just like one single thing that they do really well.
Susan, did you ever find that citation? Looks like she's still working, and I'm trying to find that. So
I am listening to what you're saying, and no,
I
I
hear you.
haven't found it yet.
Oh, you just keep going. That's
But
fine.
I cannot believe we're talking about, bathroom products
I can.
on this podcast episode. But keep going, guys. You're doing great, and I'm gonna try one more place to find this reference, and then I'll give up.
So one of the things that I want to ask your opinion about is I think there's some there's a lot of companies that have like one unified app for we'll just say global audience.
Mm,
A lot of there's multinational companies that are trying to do it all. And I
mm,
do think there's a lot of companies where the Eastern influence is seeping into the design of their apps. If you look at Facebook, is obviously a good example, but there are other examples as well, because they're trying to make a sort of a unified global brand, and so that's making like the sort of like, hey, here's like a bunch of tabs and a bunch of things, and the app, it has all this functionality. That's sort of coming in some ways, but then I feel like the Western design is also like it's all sort of like homogenizing in some way, because these
mm.
giant multinational companies just need like a
Right.
unified global app. Um, do you do you think that's a real trend? Am I imagining that? Do you think that will continue? Is there like some middle ground in between that they're gonna try and, hey, this is good enough for all audiences, and we'll just kind of hope it's good, even at maybe the detriment of not making anyone happy?
Mm, yeah, I think that's a really good observation. I think that you know, well, building products, it's a lot more than just pleasing all groups of users. It when you're building products, you're working with a business goal in mind. You probably have a lot of constraints, and I think because of these constraints, you want to build things modularly, not customizably, meaning that whatever that you decided to happen for one app with this group of user should translate to this version of that with a group of users somewhere else in the world. And like I think overall, like your design system and the level of modularity should stay consistent, and you should not just customize this one like big layout for this group of users in another culture. But all that is to say, like, I think there's definitely some like accommodation and like adaptation when it comes to applications being introduced in like or being launched in like the Asian market, like Yahoo News, for example. Their Japanese sites like very dense, and yeah, and like while a lot of these colors and and maybe some level of layout stays the same, there's just some level of adaptation there.
I would like to note for the record that the Kickstarter website has lots of white space.
It definitely does. Yeah, that's something that we talk about a lot, and we complain about.
Oh, really?
And yeah, yeah.
Okay. I have just one or two questions about Kickstarter culture. Do you guys like? Is there like, I don't know. Do people who work at Kickstarter like spend money on Kickstarter, investing in Kickstarter projects? Or is it sort of like a don't, like, you don't you sort of stay out of it because you're part of the system.
Yeah, I think a lot of us are like big fan of the product, and big fan of the community. So I wouldn't say I'm like a super backer or anything, but
Sure.
I do back quite a decent amount. And I think the thing about Kickstarter is we have fans. We have like people who are very excited about a project launching, and they would follow that creator like through and through. And yeah, it's been really interesting to like design for like such bought in like avid users, because there's a certain degree of like buying in that happened already, so like, oh, it's great, like they will use this. But then our users also very like emotionally like attached to the product because they're so bought into it that they have a lot of opinions. And yeah, it's really interesting. Kickstarter is like not transactional at all. Like, I think a lot of time you go to like an e-commerce site and you're like, all right, I'm just here to like buy the things, like who cares if it's a terrible site, like I'm just here in and out. But like with Kickstarter, you know community backers, they're fans, they're very avid about like how the product should be.
Are there any like seminal Kickstarter campaigns that like in the meeting it's sort of like there's almost like a Kickstarter wall of fame? It's like these are like the oh my god, like in Windows, like they're like if you work at Microsoft, there's like some seminal Microsoft like moments or products that like really kind of are like almost lore within the company. Um,
Legendary, you mean?
Legendary, sure, yes. Are there do you hear whispers of that at Kickstarter or not?
In terms of like projects that our creators launch, or like
Yeah.
features launch? Yeah.
I guess either. I'll take whatever.
Huh. Yeah, for sure. Like in terms of projects, there are a lot of, we call them beacon projects. Yeah, some of them went on and raised, millions of dollars. So a lot of it's kind of defined by like, how much money they raised as well, and
Yeah.
like how much hype they were able to build. So it's tied to that. And then in terms of features, it's interesting. Kickstarters, I don't think we've really like, you know, built a lot of features. Like we don't launch a lot of features. So when add-ons launch, it was the biggest feature in 5 years, and it has like a big revenue impact. And yeah, we're a lot more cautious about the things that we decided to give out to the world at Kickstarter, because fundamentally our core product is it's getting the job done. And yeah, and but I think like in this year, we have like really put ourselves out there and like really look into opportunities where like we feel confident about like launching the features, and we have worked a lot faster too. Yeah.
All right, guys. So I gave up.
Oh,
I know
I'm
it's out
sorry.
there. I'll find it at some point. And if I do, I can always, add it to the blog posts that I always write when we publish this podcast episode. So I apologize for the faulty memory and not being able to find that research study. I will find it. And if
Okay.
anyone listening knows what the heck I'm talking about, email us. All right. So I guess, Guthrie, we're probably coming to the end of our time. Did you have any other questions for Sydney?
No.
Okay. So Sydney,
much,
if people want to get hold of you, what's the best way for them to do that?
Yeah, they can definitely email me at sydney@kickstarter.com, and I would love to hear from them.
Fantastic.
So you're like the only Sydney at Kickstarter?
I guess I am, yeah. It's not a very common name.
And Guthrie, do you want to tell people how they can get hold of us if they want to get hold of us?
Yep. You can email info@theteamw.com. yeah, isn't there something else they should be checking out?
Yeah, Sydney, what anything else you want to point people at? Anything you want to, any favorite causes, any websites, anything we should give people a link to?
No, I don't think I have any websites, but I guess like yeah, to young UX designers out there who are aspiring to get a job in this field,
Yeah.
I would say that there are a couple books that I recommend. The first one is Don't Make Me Think by Steve Krug, a very famous and basically a UX textbook, which many of you might have heard about. And then there's one that I just discovered this year called Universal Design Methods. And it's, I think, 150 methods of design techniques. And it's really great. You should definitely check it out.
And do you know the author of that one?
Let me see if I could. It's a textbook, actually. The authors are Bella Martin and Bruce Hennington. Yeah, okay. 125 ways to research complex problems.
Okay.
That's excellent. See, you wrote 100 things book. They have 125.
Yeah.
They've outdone you.
They've outdone me. But I did write 100 more things. So I have 200. So I've outdone them.
That's too funny.
Sydney, thanks so much for joining us today. It's a fun conversation.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thanks, Sydney.
All right. Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye. Happy New Year.